Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Officials. We are going to give it to you with a slight change in programming. We're thinking if it's more appropriate to have it at the beginning of the week so you can see ahead what's going on. So a few things. This week, really, the biggest thing happening is the Russia-American negotiation that has excluded, of course, Ukraine, because they have no guns unless somebody gives it to them. And the meeting ended. It lasted about 4.5 hours long. It was in Riyadh. And there's a lot of messaging that I hope people are listening to. Number one, very critically, the meeting was not in Switzerland, where normally peace negotiations are. It was done in Riyadh. And this means that Mr. Trump has decided to stick a pen in the eye of Europe in case they're really not listening. And what Mr. Vance did last week essentially shocked everyone, but is delivering a message of Europe, you don't even have a seat in the car. And one of the things that we want to show you is not a fun video, but it tells you where a little bit of the European mentality is, and they really need to come out of that one. So in the next segment, please watch this video. Pay attention.
Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Okay, so we're back from the video, and you saw a grown man crying. I don't know about you, but I don't like to do a lot of that, only on very special occasions. And I think this was a special occasion for him. But it tells you that Europe is feeling forlorn, left behind. Nobody's paying attention to them. So I am here today with Will and Ed. And Will, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a sad image, really, isn't it? Europe is, you can't help but feel sorry for them, even though they've done it to themselves. They've been kind of perpetually stuck in this situation of own foot shooting. You know, we're hearing about talks of price caps coming back, being reinforced again. And it's just going to continue to worsen, really. I mean, bankruptcy recently in Germany have been on the rise. The number of corporate bankruptcies jumped to roughly 2,000.
So let me go back a little bit. In previous episodes, we have been talking that Europe, under all scenarios, loses. And this keeps on repeating itself. And if you have one of the chiefs in Munich actually crying in public, it tells you that you lost. But the point we keep on making is what Europe needs is a shot in the arm of good vitamins that can only be brought upon Europe if they stop misusing their budget. They don't need to buy Leopards and Challengers and tanks that just burn in the steppes of Russia, right? It's like, what is the point of that misallocation of resources? Will and I have been talking quite heavily about what war is. And war is a destruction of labor, your soldiers that die, and capital, which is the equipment you burn. And those two things can be used within Europe very effectively to bring it back because it's not doing so well. Ed, what would you add to that?
Yeah, it's really not. And obviously Ukraine has borne the brunt of it, naturally being the battleground. But, you know, Germany's power prices have been insane the last few years. France's debt has spiraled and it's gone out of control. Governments have collapsed. I don't think there was last year a single incumbent government that won the election. And Scholz is going to get kicked out this weekend. So another domino is going to fall.
Yeah. Anybody remaining gets fired
Last
again.
man standing.
Yeah. So it's quite sad in Europe. And that means that for you, viewer, the line of travel for consumption in Europe is boxed. It's not getting any better So if we look at the world as a whole, Europe is the one dragging down consumption globally. I think the US, with Trump, is doing well, or is going to do well as he tariffs everybody and tries to bring in production onshore. So energy demand in the US will go up. Energy demand in Europe will go down. But energy supply in the US will also go up because he is taking the manacles in the production. So that brings us back again to things still look bearish.
Yeah.
But you were discussing a bit about the price cap. So that's one of the latest things that happened today because the US wants to teach Russia a lesson where it can feel some pain and be more inclined to give something in the negotiations they have. But what was the experience before with the price caps?
Well, it just led to a huge effort from trade houses around the world to negotiate, well, to navigate around those price caps. And you just saw euros flowing out of Russia to Asia, and the trade houses were taking quite a decent chunk of that.
Yeah, we could not help but notice that the profit of the trade houses was very high at the time that there was a large deviation between the market price and the cap.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we must remember really is that a price cap doesn't increase supply. If anything, decreases it. So in a way, that's a little bit bullish, but it's also negative for the consumer. So what does Trump want, Ed?
Trump wants cheap gasoline. That's the number one plan domestically. But if he's pursuing policies that would limit supply, that's really contradicting himself. His foreign policy doesn't align with his domestic policy. It seems to be living in a bit cloud cuckoo land where he thinks he can just hit everybody, reduce supply, and yet still produce enough in the US to make the gasoline really cheap. But it's not realistic.
Okay, that's our conclusion in that area. And the other thing we wanted to bring to your attention is China. We were discussing earlier in our office that China is doing very well, it seems. All the data is coming in, but we were teasing that a good economist doesn't read retrospective data. A good economist sees forward what's coming. And the moment they release the liquidity in the system at the end of last year, it was obvious that China was going to grow. But what do you see in terms of the figures?
Yeah, so I mean, what the key barometer that we've been looking at recently has been the 10-year CGB yield, so the Chinese government bond yields. They've ticked up from around 1.58% to 1.73 this morning, so up around 15 bips from their January lows. Some of that will be to do with inflation printing a little bit hotter. So January inflation came out at 0.5%. But some of that is also driven by investors regaining confidence. So we've seen portfolio rotation out of the safe haven, the China government bond, into equities, specifically technology stocks after the DeepSeek success story, but also in housing stocks, because we've seen some good data come from HSBC in January. But really, sentiment is starting to improve in China, and that's being reflected in the data now.
Finally, retrospectively.
Yeah.
Prospectively, still things look good. So for our viewers, we have a little bit of a view on where things are going. Stock markets seem doing well. The US, I think, has more uplift. China definitely has an uplift. And strangely, even Europe has an uplift if they stop moaning and focus on the peace dividend. Because if the war between Russia and Ukraine stops, then they can open up for gas and do things that are good for their population. But the leaders don't seem to be too interested in the population. They want to stroke their egos, send troops to Ukraine, destroy some of the labor that is needed. I mean, all these countries in Europe are aging so fast. And why do you want to kill your young in a foreign land? I honestly don't understand the mentality at all. And I worry very much for young people like Will and Ed because it's their future, what's going to happen. But anyway, in the meantime, we also have some areas of happiness, and that area of happiness is foreign travel, which we like very much. So what are our views on the jet fuel?
Well, it seems pretty positive, even if aviation is going through a bit of a tricky time with a number of serious incidents in the last few weeks.
Because all the crashes.
Because of a number of what we might call safety incidents, euphemistically. But overall, I think the demand for air travel is pretty strong. I mean, China, for instance, is easing its visa requirements, which is going to increase travel. We've seen a lot of Chinese travelers go perhaps to Thailand, particularly Japan. Although Japan's had some pretty cold winter weather recently, it's still...
Skiing is very good there.
Exactly. Skiing is good. And also, the demand for Japan is massive. I mean, just even anecdotally, I know a number of people who keep saying, I want to go to Japan, I want to go to Japan. So it's clearly a popular destination. And also just generally the movement that's going on at the moment is very, very positive, I think, for jet demand.
So if we conclude what we are sharing with you today is we still remain bearish on the outlook for crude, but we are bullish on the jet to crude crack, I think is a good one that you should focus on. We remain very bullish on gold. If you look at our previous podcasts, we were forecasting 3,000 an ounce, and we're shy of that. Next time we meet you, we'll have some fizzy drink here to celebrate that when it hits the 3,000, but it's definitely coming. Now, to close this segment, I would like you to focus on next week. It's IE week. Many of our friends are coming, and maybe we'll have some of them even in the studio sharing their views with you, what they see. But I think where the mind needs to be next week is on these negotiations between Russia and America, which one of his staff says they need to happen in Trump's time. And that means very fast. And he wants to have peace by maybe Easter week. So that's in April. So quite soon, and that's going to increase supply globally. So watch out for that. With that, we'll see you in the next segment. Thank you very much. Thank you, Will and Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jorge.